Howdy y'all. Today we're going to replace a common maintenance item in these 4 series C and D series backhoes. Stay tuned. You might have the misfortune to hop into your backhoe one morning and this happens. It kind of makes the backhoe inoperable at the time. And what it is, it's a little shock cylinder that holds the steering wheel in place. I've got an aftermarket replacement right here. So let me show you how to replace it. You're going to need to take out these Torx head bolts in here, and the 2 under here on the steering column. Those are going to be a T30 Torx. And thankfully, Cat put a nice little holder here where you can put them in to save them for the time being. With those removed, you can clearly see the shock right here down below. To peel back the rubber firewall, you're going to need to remove a Torx bolt there and a Torx bolt there. If you're finding that the steering wheel won't stay up in place and give you room to work, I use a really long bungee cord and just loosely bungee it over here to the striker. With that peeled back, it will give you access to the lower pin on the pressurized strut. Using a 6mm hex, remove the bolt on the upper strut. Remove the bolt on the opposite side. Using a hammer and punch, drive out the lower pin holding the shock. With the pin punched out of there, you can remove the cylinder. It's easier to punch it all the way through at this point than to try and punch it back through from that side. With the lower pin removed, I'm going to take both struts over on the workbench and swap over the parts. The original Cat cylinder is a 1490780 or a 1490785. I'll be replacing it with this Blue Mac cylinder. It's slightly shorter, probably won't last quite as long, but for what we're using this backhoe for, it's going to be just fine for us. Our first step is going to be to take this pin out of here. There's a roll pin, just like the one that came in the kit. You're going to need an 1/8" punch for that. Because this is spring loaded right here, take care not to lose the spring or have any parts come flying out. And the lever and the spring can be removed. Because the other parts were already supplied in the new kit, we don't need to disassemble that any further. Next step is to screw this release block where the release lever sets onto the strut. Now I want to back off this nut to make sure that I have it down far enough. Now's a good time to compare the overall length of the two assembled to make sure you have the right length. It appears I need to release this one a couple of threads just to make them the same. Now that our distance is close, I'm going to tighten this nut just finger tight. Now I can assemble the release lever. First insert your spring, but you want to make sure that you have that spring inside of this little dog ear here so that it'll move freely up and down. I like to put my 1/8" punch in there just to hold it. Next step is to insert your roll pin. With the punch installed, I like to do this on the corner of a vise, and I can insert the pin from the top, and as it goes through into the hole, it'll release that punch. If you like, you can center it a little further. It's not completely necessary. Next step is going to be to install it in the machine. The kit supplied with a new lower pin that is tapered more on one side than the other, so I'm going to drive this right to left. With the pin started in place, we can insert our lower cylinder. And mine's going through rather freely. If you find yours fits loose, you could always reuse your old one if it doesn't have this sandal wear. With that firmly in place, we can install the rest of the unit. Once you swing the strut in place, You can install your bolts from each side. I like to start them both first before I tighten them up. If you find that your bolts don't line up and your strut's not working properly, you can pre-compress this in a vise before you try to install it. But in my case, they work just fine because I matched what came out of here. And remember, I'm not an expert, this is just how I do it, and you're dealing with compressed energy here, so be very careful. It may take a bit of experimentation, but we're almost there. I like to tighten them evenly to make sure everything lines up. If everything's lined up like it should be, the shoulder of that bolt will go right inside that bracket. That one's tight. Let's tighten the other side. Alright, looking good. Next thing, I'm going to test it for functionality. In my case, it's not adjusting back up, so I know I need to loosen up this block. So I'm going to screw it out a few threads and give it a try again. Got my adjustment done. Let's see how it looks. Looks like everything's working like it should. This is the aftermarket block that goes up at the top of the cylinder here. And I noticed something immediately. I was having trouble making that actuate. And the distance between the very bottom of this block and the bottom of that thread hole is substantially lower than on the cat one. So the problem I was having is I could not thread that shock in there far enough to make it actuate the adjustment. So I had to remove this aftermarket block and put the factory Caterpillar one on there for it to work. So I learned a lesson. In the end, did I save anything? Probably not. That cost me about an hour worth of frustration. I had done a replacement on this 2 or 3 times over the years, and this is my final iteration. Judging by the date on the past cylinder, it was around 2014, so it had a pretty good lifespan, and it was a genuine cat part. I also noticed that the pin in the bottom of the cylinder is not a snug fit like it should be. I had to reuse the cat one as well. So all of the aftermarket parts that came with that, I didn't use. Only the roll pin was usable. Now I don't have very good faith in this cylinder judging by the other parts that came with it. But we'll see. Time will tell. Next step, replace this rubber firewall. I just replaced that bolt here and the one right there. Next we'll put in the steering column cover. There it is, working just like it should. My takeaway from this, stick with the Caterpillar parts. Aftermarkets just aren't worth the hassle. But I do want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. That's not what I had in mind. Howdy! Why are you guys still here? As long as you're still here, you might as well subscribe. It's right there. It's super easy. One click. One click.